Writing. The billionaire woman laughed the moment he said it. Not a polite laugh, not the kind people use when they are nervous, but a sharp, effortless laugh that filled the glass-walled conference room. She looked at the black single father standing in front of her in a faded navy shirt and worn shoes and shook her head as if he had just told the most ridiculous joke she had heard all week. "You speak 9 languages?" she asked with disbelief. Around the table, executives exchanged amused glances. What she did not know was that this man had spent years teaching himself languages at night while his little daughter slept beside him, because he had once promised his late wife that he would give their child every opportunity they could no longer afford. And within the next 10 minutes, the billionaire would discover that the man she had laughed at might be the one person in the room capable of saving her company. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, hard work, and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like, comment, share this story, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us bring more stories about ordinary people who prove that greatness isn't always dressed in expensive clothes. His name was Marcellus Reed, a 38-year-old father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Amara, alone in a small apartment above an old bakery. Every morning began before sunrise. Marcellus packed Amara's lunch, braided her hair, checked her homework, and walked her to school before taking 2 buses across the city to work. His job was simple. He was a temporary facilities assistant at a multinational technology company called Vera Global. Nobody there knew much about him. They saw a quiet man who repaired broken equipment, carried boxes, cleaned conference rooms, and occasionally stayed late. They did not know that before his wife died, Marcellus had studied international communication at night. They did not know that he had learned Spanish from his grandmother, French from old library books, Portuguese through recordings, Arabic from a retired neighbor, German from textbooks, Mandarin through free online lessons, Italian from films, Japanese through language exchanges, and Swahili because his wife had once dreamed of visiting East Africa with him. His wife, Nia, had been the person who believed in him when nobody else did. After she passed away following a sudden illness, Marcellus nearly abandoned his dreams. Grief had swallowed their home. But one night, while sorting through Nia's belongings, he found a small note she had written to him. It simply reminded him that their daughter was watching him and that someday Amara would need to know what it meant to keep going when life became unfair. So he kept going. Then came the morning that changed everything. Vera Global was hosting an emergency meeting because a major international contract was collapsing. A delegation from 9 countries had arrived, but the company's hired interpreters had been delayed by a transportation strike. The billionaire founder and CEO, Serafina Vale, was furious. She had built Vera from a tiny startup into a company worth billions, and she had no patience for mistakes. As executives scrambled around her, Marcellus quietly entered the conference room carrying a replacement projector cable. He noticed the foreign delegates sitting silently, unable to understand one another, and without thinking, he greeted one of them in Spanish. The room went silent. He then switched to French when another delegate answered. A few stunned faces turned toward him. Serafina stared. Someone asked whether he had prepared for the meeting. Marcellus shook his head and said he simply knew the languages. Then, perhaps because the pressure of the moment had made him forget how people usually judged him, he admitted that he spoke 9. Serafina laughed. She asked him to prove it. Marcellus stepped toward the first delegate and spoke Spanish fluently. Then French. Then Portuguese. Arabic followed, and the room became completely silent. He moved naturally into German, then Italian, Mandarin, Japanese, and finally Swahili. He did not boast. He did not smile triumphantly. He simply translated questions, explained concerns, and helped the delegates understand one another. Serafina's expression changed completely. The meeting that had been expected to end in disaster lasted another 2 hours. Marcellus translated technical concerns, cultural misunderstandings, and contract conditions that could easily have been misinterpreted. By the end, the international partners agreed to stay. The billion-dollar contract was saved. But Marcellus expected nothing. The next morning, he returned to work as usual. Instead of finding a broken elevator or a stack of supplies, he found Serafina waiting outside the maintenance office. She told him that his talent was extraordinary. Marcellus simply replied that he had been lucky enough to learn from people who were willing to teach him. She asked why he had never applied for a better position. He looked down and admitted that nobody had ever asked him what he could do beyond the job printed on his employee badge. That sentence stayed with Serafina. For the first time in years, she realized how often she had looked at people through titles, clothing, salaries, and resumes instead of seeing the human being underneath. She offered Marcellus a position leading Vera's international communications team. He hesitated. He had a daughter, school schedules, bills, and a life that could not simply be rearranged overnight. Serafina surprised him by saying that the company would support his responsibilities as a father. Months later, Marcellus stood on a stage at Vera's headquarters, not wearing an expensive suit, but wearing the same simple watch Nia had given him years earlier. Amara sat in the front row, smiling proudly. Serafina introduced him to hundreds of employees and told them that the greatest mistake she had ever made was laughing before she listened. Marcellus looked at his daughter and remembered the nights when he had studied beside her bed, exhausted and afraid. He remembered the tiny apartment, the unpaid bills, the loneliness, and the promise he had made to her mother. He had not become successful because someone powerful rescued him. He became successful because, even when nobody was watching, he refused to stop learning. And perhaps that was the real lesson. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying a talent that could change an entire room. Sometimes greatness is hidden beneath a work uniform, behind tired eyes, or inside someone who has simply been given the wrong opportunity. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. You never know whose life might be changed by a little kindness. And before you leave, make one special request to yourself: commit to judging people by what they carry inside, not by what they wear on the outside. Because Marcellus Reed walked into that room as a man nobody noticed. He walked out as the man nobody could ignore.